Howdy folks, Cowboy Frank here. Welcome to this basic tutorial on Open Broadcast Studio, or OBS for short. I've been using OBS for about 3 years now, primarily for webcasting board meetings and the annual convention of the International Gay Rodeo Association. I'm not an expert in OBS, but I'm going to try to cover some of the basics in setting up OBS in such a way that you should be able to understand how to work with most of the settings that the average user would need to know about. So let's get started. I've already installed OBS, and what we're going to talk about is just the settings involved. This is the way that OBS usually starts out. I like to use what's referred to as the studio mode. Studio mode allows you to set up ahead of time your scene over on the left side, and when you hit the transition button, that scene either dissolves or cuts over to the right side, which is what's actually being broadcast or recorded, depending upon your settings. Let's start out in the settings area. The General tab is pretty straightforward. Lots of languages available in the program. There are currently, in version 20.0.1, there are 3 themes available. Dark might be useful if you're working in a room without a whole lot of backlight, like if you were doing gaming or something like that. This is a new scene here, which has got some color in it. We'll stick with the default on this one for this tutorial. Automatically check for updates on startup. If you're doing live broadcasting, you may want to consider turning this off, because if you start up OBS, it's going to, and there is a new version available, it's going to give you a pop-up notifying you of that, and I find that a bit distracting. So I only turn that on when I'm not preparing to actually do live broadcasting. The next section, show confirmation dialog when starting streams and when stopping streams. This could be very useful. That'll give you a pop-up when you click the start button, or when you click the stop button, just in case you inadvertently hit it when you didn't mean to. Automatically record when streaming, if that's checked, OBS will do a recording onto your hard drive as well as stream out to whatever your service may be. The source alignment snapping, what that will do is to help you in positioning different windows within the frame. If you drag something to one corner, it'll snap to the corner or snap to other sources. That'll become a little bit more evident as we get further in. If you're dealing with projectors, hide cursor over projectors. These settings down here could be useful in those particular aspects. Let's click on the stream key. This is what you would, where you set your output if you're streaming out to the internet. There are quite a few streaming services that are pre-configured in here. I use YouTube. That's the only one I use, so that's the one we'll start. But if you're in some of these others, this next one down here, which is called server, can give you an option of different servers to connect to that particular service. In the case of YouTube, there are only 2 servers. There's the primary and the backup. Stream key is the code that you would put in to designate that this is your stream and not somebody else's. Clicking on the output tab, the simple setting, your video bit rate. I'm recording this one. I'm going to record this one at a high bit rate because I'm intending to upload it. You can set this for whatever you like within reason. If your particular stream service doesn't allow a particular rate, like for example, let's take Twitch and come back here to the output. If I try to set it for a number that is too high, you get a little warning down here. In this case, switch. It says that the streaming video bitrate will be set for 6,000, which is the upper limit for the current streaming service. YouTube doesn't have that limit. So I'm setting it for YouTube's recommended rate. In order to determine what bitrate you should be using for both streaming, or I should say for streaming or uploading, I would suggest you search the internet for two items. Now this is if you're dealing with YouTube. I don't know about the other services. If you search the internet for recommended upload settings YouTube help, then you will get the YouTube help page, which gives you the bit rates and so forth that you should set these for. If you search for live encoder settings, bit rates and resolutions YouTube help, that'll give you the best solution, or the best rates to put in here if you're actually live streaming versus recording. The encoder is what you have to choose from here is going to be somewhat dependent on the specific pieces of hardware that you have in your computer. Over in the, over in the advanced mode, there's some other options involved. In my particular machine, Quick Sync is a function built into Intel's video system. My computer has that in it. Most people would probably take the X264. But if go back over here on the simple, we don't really have those options. You get different options there. So depending upon what your hardware has, you may want to change that. I've never messed with the audio bit rate because the defaults work quite nicely for me. Down in the recording section, this defines where on your computer a recording is going to be saved, and this is, you browse just like you would for any other program that you're going to save files on. Recording quality, same as stream, is going to give you the same thing as you got up here, but there are other options available, such as high quality, indistinguishable quality, which creates pretty large files, and they've also got lossless quality. Now I advise against this unless you have a very specific reason, because this can create monstrous files. They're saying it can use upward of 7 gigs of space per minute at high resolutions. So for this particular video, I'm choosing the indistinguishable quality size, and what I'm going to be doing with that is I'm going to be editing it later, so this will give me a pretty good sized file, but is the best possible quality without going overboard. Down here you've got a number of recording formats. FLV is basically an Adobe format. You've also got MOV, which is popular with Macintosh and a lot of other systems. MP4 has a problem with it, that if anything at all goes wrong with your recording before it's finished and everything is properly saved, the output file will be corrupted. So you may want to keep that in mind when choosing MP4 as your type of file to save. Different options down here. I'm going to pick this one just for the sake of argument because my computer happens to have it. The audio options, pretty much these work by themselves. The default is generally pretty much suitable for most purposes. Now we get down to the video. Your base canvas size, that is the size of your monitor or the screen that you're capturing or producing for your output. You can, if for some reason you need to have the output at a different resolution, you can choose a smaller resolution, such as 1280 by 720. The advantage to that is if in order to do a 1920 by 1080 output, if you're streaming, requires a pretty hefty upload bandwidth. I think it's in excess of 12 megs per second. So if you don't have that kind of available, you may want to downsample or scale down the resolution for your output. Hotkeys can be extremely useful if you're doing a lot of manipulating of your production. You can choose various key combinations on your keyboard, such as, let's see, Control Alt J, and if I hit that combination, then in the case that I just put it in there, then it'll start streaming. You have another one or the same one for stop streaming. Oops, let's see. I don't want that. I want to clear it. Okay. As you add more items, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, the stuff on this page will run off the bottom, and you'll get options to set all kinds of settings for start, stop, push to talk, push to mute, etc., etc. I'm not going to cover the stuff in advance because, to be very honest, I've never used any of it. It all works quite nicely the way it is. Okay. We're going now our main screen. Down in the lower left, we've got what are referred to as scenes. Scene is the organization of windows or images or whatever else is going to be part of your production. I'm going to right click on default, and I'm going to change the name. I'm going to rename this to, let's say, SCENE1. Now we've got scene 1 set up, and now we need to add something to put into it. So over here in the sources, I can either click the plus, or I can right click, and we want to add. Let's see, first thing we will add here, let's see, let me go through some of these. You don't normally need to do the audio input unless it's something special. Blackmagic, I have a Blackmagic capture card on this computer. A browser source, let's try Firefox and see what we get. Nope, that's not going to work. So let's ignore that one. I've never used that one before. Let's try display capture. Is going to capture one of your screens. Now the computer that I have on here right now has got 4 screens on it. I'm going to choose screen 4. And let's see, that's not the one I want. Let's see. That's the one I want there. Now we're going to add another one. Well, let me explain this. This little eye here will blank out or turn off that particular source. This lock is something that's new in version 2.0. If you click the lock, notice how up here there is a red frame around, or border around the item we're looking at. Tell you what, I'm going to turn off studio mode here for a moment so we get a bigger image so we can look at it. You can grab this image or this source with your left mouse button, and you can move it around. This will become a little bit more obvious when we get into other items here in a minute. You can also change the size by grabbing one corner. And right there, you notice how it jumped right there. Do it again. Notice how it jumps right there. That comes back to this setting that we were talking about earlier, where it says snap sources to edge of screen. Okay, this lock, what that will do if you click it, it will remove that so that you can't accidentally mess something up. And that's new, and it is effective on each and every source that we add. Okay, let's add another source. In this case, we're going to add a video capture device, and I'm going to say camera. And let's see, that's not the camera that I want. I got several cameras on this computer. This is the one I want to use. There are things you can do here. Let's see. You can deactivate it. I'm not quite sure why you would want to, but it may have something to do with the way that the program interacts with some equipment. If the device is configurable, this should open the dialog box which allows you to manipulate the camera. Sometimes you may have a crossbar, which is another manipulation. This particular camera doesn't. As far as the resolution is concerned, you can choose the device default, which is whatever that particular device says it wants to use, or you can choose custom and click this arrow here and choose amongst the various possibilities that that camera can handle. Now I'm going to pick a small one in this case. Let's try a 960 by 554. Give us a nice wide picture. And then further down the screen there are various settings that some will be there, some of them may not be available depending upon your particular device you're capturing. Now, I think that picture is a little too big, so see the red border around it. If I click over here, you see the red border now is covering the background. So that determines which object or which source you're working with. I'm going to choose this source, and I'm going to shrink this down some. And let's move it down here to the lower right and watch it jump to the corner. All right, let's add another item. This time I'm going to add a window capture, and what I want to capture in this case, I'm going to capture Firefox, which happens to be my favorite browser. Okay, and it just so happens that that's the one that popped up. Nope, the first one that popped up is a Microsoft Word document which I have open right now. So here's Firefox. Let me go back to my home page on that. Down here, window match priority. You've got three options here. Let me explain something to begin with. Looking back here behind, this tab up here, and almost all web browsers now have these. What shows up in there is what's referred to as the page title. That's controlled by the website itself, or the particular page that you've opened. If you choose down here that window title must match, if anything doesn't quite match, then it won't work. You've also got this down here is match title, otherwise find window of same type, or match title, otherwise find window of same executable. In this case, we're dealing with Firefox, so that should give us the same. All right. Okay, now we've got three items here. Let's manipulate the Firefox window a little bit here. You notice how it's covering me up. The order that things are going to show in the window from back to front is determined by the order you have down here in sources. In this particular case, I would like to have the camera on top all the time. So I'm going to put the camera up there. Firefox is second and the screen is third. Now if I take Firefox and move it to the bottom, it's now, you can still see where it is by this red rectangle, but it's behind the screen capture. If I turn off the screen capture, then there's our Firefox. Now let's move Firefox back up again. Okay. This is our scene. Let me go back to the studio mode. This is scene 1. Now, we can create more scenes, and we can switch back and forth between them by selecting them over here under the scenes category. There are several ways you can do this. You can create a new scene, let's say scene 2, and then I can start right-clicking over here and adding objects to it. Another way you can do this, and I'm going to get rid of this one here for a second. Another way you can do this is you can right-click and you can duplicate. And let's rename that so it makes a little more sense. And what that will do is take all your sources and copy them down to scene 2. So now, if we're in scene 2, here's how the scenes work. I'm going to turn Firefox off on scene 2, but leave it on scene 1. So I can switch back and forth between these two scenes here. When I get the one I want, then I click transition, and what's here will dissolve in over there. Now you notice this is what was over here has now switched over here. There's a setting in here someplace that I came across the other day. Here it is. Click on the gear. This says swap preview and output scenes after transitioning. I find that a little bit awkward. If you've only got 2 scenes to work with, that might be a good thing to work with. But that's not what I want. I want to be able to control mine individually. So if I turn that off, then as I change things over here, I can transition. You can also transition. That's a fade. I can do a cut. Let's see, turn Firefox back on, and I can cut. My personal preference is I like the fade because I think it's a lot smoother. By the way, when I changed that from fade to cut or from cut to fade, I found I need to click here once in order for it to grab hold. Otherwise, changing the transition doesn't work. That may be a bug in the system. Hopefully, if it is, then hopefully he'll get it fixed the next time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the basic settings. When you get ready to start, down here there's Start Streaming and there's Start Recording. And back in the settings mode, if we had this one checked, then when we click the streaming, recording would start automatically also. I hope this has been a useful tutorial, and I will probably make some others of various types as time goes on. Take care, folks, and cowboy up.